Lenora Penhaligon was traveling through the snow 2 days before Christmas because her aunt was about to lose everything. The estate, the land, the house her uncle had died believing would remain in the family. By Christmas morning, the debt would be called. And if Lenora did not reach her aunt before Christmas Day, her aunt would sign the papers transferring the entire estate to the only man wealthy enough to buy their debts, unless Lenora agreed to marry him. It was not a choice Lenora intended to let her make. The carriage lurched. Lenora's hand caught the edge of the seat as the wheels scraped over uneven ground. Then, without warning, the motion slowed and stopped. She lifted her head at once. "What is it?" The footman climbed down into the snow. "I'll check, miss." The door closed again. Wind pressed against the carriage walls. Snow whispered along the panels. Lenora leaned back, eyes unfocused. If she failed to arrive in time, her aunt would sign because she believed she had no other way, because she had already lost her husband, because she would sacrifice land, memory, and home rather than see Lenora blamed. That expectation sat heavy on Lenora's chest. She was meant to stop this. That was why she was here. The door opened. "We're stuck," the footman said. "There's a posting house just ahead. Roads are closing." Lenora didn't hesitate. "I'll check myself." She stepped down into the snow. Her companion followed, silent and steady. Inside, the posting house was crowded and overheated. Damp cloaks, raised voices, evening light slipping fast beyond the windows. Lenora went straight to the desk. "I need a room," she said. The man behind it barely looked up. "None left." "None?" she pressed. "Not one." Her breath caught despite her effort to keep it steady. She stepped aside, trying to think, smoothing her gloves only to find her hands shaking. Across the room, a door stood slightly apart from the noise. Above it, a simple sign read, "Solicitor." A man stood just outside it, fastening his gloves as if he had only just concluded business elsewhere. He noticed her hesitation, the way she stood too still. He crossed the room. "Pardon me, miss," he said, polite and unassuming. "I don't mean to intrude, but you appear rather flustered." Lenora turned toward him, guarded. "Why would that concern you?" He paused. "Because it usually means there is a reason." She hesitated, then spoke, clipped and controlled. "There are no rooms, and I cannot afford to be delayed." "Because of the storm?" he asked. "Because of Christmas," Lenora said. "If I do not reach my aunt before morning, she will sign over her entire estate to a man who has agreed to buy her debts, on the condition that I marry him." That earned his full attention. She didn't wait. "Do you have a carriage?" Lenora asked. "Large enough to take us to our destination tonight?" He considered her carefully. "It would not be safe," he said at last. "Not in this weather, and not at this hour." Her shoulders fell just slightly. "But," he continued, "I can offer you and your company shelter for the night. My estate is nearby. You may continue at first light." The wind rattled the windows, answering for him. Lenora nodded once, because standing still was worse, and Christmas morning was still coming. The carriage turned off the main road and climbed slowly, wheels crunching over snow-packed gravel. Lenora sat upright, hands folded tightly in her lap. "How far?" she asked. "Not far," the man replied. 5 minutes, perhaps." 5 minutes was nothing, and everything. The carriage jolted once more, then steadied. Lantern light appeared ahead. Warm, steady, unmoving. Lenora exhaled for the first time since the posting house. The carriage stopped. "We've arrived," he said. The footman opened the door. Cold rushed in again, sharper now, but the house before them was solid, stone, wide, unhurried, as if it had been standing there long before storms learned how to threaten it. Lenora stepped down. "This is your estate?" she asked. "Yes." He did not embellish it. He did not seem to need to. Inside, the entrance hall was quiet. Not empty. Contained. A fire burned low. A clock ticked somewhere out of sight. A butler appeared almost immediately. "Henderson," the man said, removing his gloves. "Prepare rooms. Our guests will stay the night." Henderson's gaze flicked briefly to Lenora, then back. "Very good, sir." Lenora hesitated. "I don't wish to be an inconvenience," she said. "We will leave at first light." "That was already assumed," he replied. She looked at him then, properly. "You haven't even asked my name," she said. "No," he agreed, "but you needed shelter before conversation. That was considerate. Annoyingly so." "Lenora Penhaligon," she said. He inclined his head. "Edmund Langbourne." She waited. "And?" she prompted. A faint pause, almost a smile. "You may call me Langbourne," he said. "My title complicates things unnecessarily." She accepted that. Titles always did. Henderson returned. "The east guest room is ready. Your companion's room is adjoining." "Thank you," Lenora said. As they walked, she became aware of the quiet again, not oppressive, but watchful. This was a house used to listening. "You were with the solicitors," she said. "Yes." "For your own affairs?" "For my family's." That explained more than he intended. They stopped outside the guest room. "You'll be warm here," Langbourne said. "There will be supper shortly." "I won't eat much," Lenora replied. "But thank you." He nodded, then hesitated. "You said your aunt would sign tomorrow," he said. "Yes. And that you believe there is another solution." "There must be," Lenora said. "Marriage should not be used like a debt instrument." "That is a dangerous opinion," he said mildly. "I'm aware." A beat passed between them. "Rest," he said. "Morning comes quickly." He turned to leave. "Mr. Langbourne," Lenora said. He looked back. "You didn't have to offer this," she said. "You gain nothing." His expression shifted. Not softened, but honest. "I gain sleep," he said, "knowing I didn't send someone into a storm when I could prevent it." Then he was gone. The door closed. Lenora stood still for a moment. Then she crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. The fire crackled quietly. Shelter, safety, and still. Tomorrow. If she did not reach her aunt in time, the papers would be signed. The estate gone. Her aunt displaced by love disguised as necessity. Lenora pressed her hands together. This was not over. It was only paused, and she could not afford to waste a single hour of it. Lenora did not sleep deeply. She slept in intervals, waking each time the wind struck the windows, each time the clock marked another hour closer to Christmas morning. When the knock came, she was already sitting up. "Miss Penhaligon," a maid said softly through the door. "His Grace asks that you join the family for breakfast." "Family." The words settled uneasily in Lenora's chest. She dressed quickly. Her companion moved quietly beside her. The footman waited outside, hat in hand. As they were led downstairs, Lenora's thoughts snagged. The house had been so quiet when she arrived. Too quiet for a family gathering. No voices, no movement, no sense of people already settled in for Christmas. She hadn't thought there was company at all. That made her wary. The breakfast room was long and bright despite the snow pressing at the windows. A wide table dominated the center, already occupied. Conversation paused. Every head turned. "So," a woman's voice said, "the storm delivers guests after all." Lenora recognized her at once. She sat near the head of the table, spine rigid, silver hair pinned precisely, eyes sharp with the confidence of someone long accustomed to being obeyed. "The Duke's aunt." Langbourne stepped forward at once. "My aunt," he said calmly. "This is Miss Lenora Penhaligon." The woman's gaze traveled slowly, from Lenora's face to her gloves, then back again. "Penhaligon," she repeated. "Traveling alone." "With her companion," Langbourne said evenly. A faint smile curved the woman's mouth. "Of course." Lenora inclined her head. "Good morning, madam." "Is it?" the aunt replied lightly. "We were not expecting company." "That," Langbourne said, "was the storm's doing." A chair scraped. A woman rose, graceful, polite, carefully pleasant. I'm Marian, she said warmly. Edmund's sister. At her side sat a small girl, legs swinging beneath the chair, eyes bright with interest. And this, Marian added, smiling fondly, is Eleanor. The child leaned forward. Are you staying forever? Eleanor, Marian murmured. Lenora smiled, despite herself. I don't believe so. That's a shame, Eleanor said thoughtfully. People who leave always miss the shouting. The table went quiet. Langbourne cleared his throat. Eleanor. But it's true, she insisted cheerfully. Aunt Agatha shouts when the will is mentioned. Aunt Agatha does not shout, the older woman snapped. Eleanor considered this. You shout quieter. A snort came from further down the table. The aunt's eyes flashed. Children should be taught restraint. Langbourne reached for the marmalade with deliberate calm. And honesty, he said. Eleanor beamed. Lenora lowered herself into the seat indicated for her, suddenly very aware of every glance. So, the aunt said, folding her napkin. Miss Penhaligon, you arrive in the middle of a family gathering. I didn't plan it, Lenora replied. No one ever does, the woman said. And yet here you are. Langbourne set his cup down. She will stay until the road's clear. And then? The aunt asked lightly. Will she be on her way to someone particular? Lenora felt the question for what it was. Before she could answer, Langbourne spoke. She's on her way to family, he said, which makes her situation quite understandable. The aunt smiled thinly. You are very quick to defend. I'm very quick to be accurate. Eleanor leaned toward Lenora again. Are you marrying my uncle? Eleanor, Marian hissed. Lenora blinked, then answered gently. No. Oh, Eleanor said, disappointed. That's probably better. Grown-ups get very strange about weddings. That earned a few smiles. Not from the aunt. Well, the woman said briskly, rising, if breakfast has become entertainment, I see no reason to remain. She swept out, skirts snapping behind her. The room exhaled. Langbourne looked at Lenora. You see, he said mildly, we are not dull. Lenora managed a small smile. Number. They were not. And now she understood why the house had felt so quiet the night before. Everyone had been waiting. Lenora had not known there was a meeting. She realized it only when she stepped into the drawing room and saw the chairs drawn close, the fire banked high, and the solicitor standing beside the mantel with his papers aligned too precisely to be casual. Conversation stopped. The Duke turned at once. Miss Penhaligon, I was just leaving, Lenora said, already stepping back. No, he said quietly. Please, sit. His tone made it sound like courtesy. His eyes said something else. He guided her not to the table, but to a chair set slightly apart, angled so she could see everyone without being placed among them. That was deliberate. His aunt noticed immediately. I fail to see, she said sharply, why an outsider should remain for family matters. The solicitor cleared his throat. Madam, if I may, this will not take long. Then let us proceed, the aunt snapped. Some of us have waited long enough. Lenora folded her hands in her lap and said nothing. The solicitor began, not with ceremony, but with certainty. The late Duke's primary estate, he said, is left to his eldest legitimate son. The room went still. The Duke did not move. Across from him, his aunt stiffened. Of course it is, she said tightly, because tradition matters more than devotion. The solicitor continued without comment. Certain parcels of land, he said, are left to the Duke's sister. The sister smiled easily. A cottage suits me perfectly, she said. My husband earns more than enough. I need nothing further. A few restrained reactions flickered around the table. Not the aunt's. And what of me? She demanded. The solicitor glanced down. You are left the southern land holdings. The aunt's face flushed. Land, she repeated. After I cared for him, after everything. She rose abruptly. This is an insult. The Duke stood. Aunt, I have heard enough, she snapped, and swept from the room. The door closed hard. Silence followed. The solicitor pressed on. "To the younger legitimate son," he said, "a modest estate to be held outright." The younger brother nodded once, satisfied. Then, "To the middle son," the solicitor said carefully, "a parcel of land by the river." A harsh laugh cut the air. "That drunk?" the younger brother said. "He deserves nothing." The Duke's jaw tightened. "Enough." "There is more," the solicitor said. The room leaned inward. "A second estate," he continued, "is to be released to the middle son only at the Duke's discretion, upon proof of responsibility." A murmur rippled. The sister tilted her head, interested now. "That's generous," she said lightly. "Or cruel, depending on one's habits." The Duke said nothing. Lenora watched him. Not the titles, not the inheritance, but the weight settling on his shoulders. This was not victory. This was burden. The solicitor folded his papers. "That concludes the summary." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the sister rose, smoothing her skirts. "Well," she said pleasantly, "I think father was quite fair, don't you?" Her smile lingered too long. Lenora felt it then, a faint, unwelcome certainty. Something here was wrong. Not loud, not obvious, but wrong all the same. The Duke glanced toward Lenora, just once, as if checking that she was still there, and in that look, she understood something else. Whatever had just been read aloud would not be the end of this. It was only the beginning. Lenora did not remain long after the drawing room emptied. She rose quietly and left without announcement. No one stopped her, no one noticed. Her room was warm, too warm. She removed her gloves and set them aside, then stood as if deciding whether to sit or leave again. "I should go," she thought. The knock came. "Miss Penhaligon." She opened the door. He stood there, holding a covered tray. "You weren't at dinner," he said. "I didn't think I was expected." "You were." He stepped inside and placed the tray on the table near the fire. "I asked them not to make it formal," he added. "You've had enough of ceremony today." "That's very kind," she said. "It seemed necessary." She hesitated, then sat. "You didn't need to trouble yourself," she said. "I did," he replied simply. He uncovered the dishes. Soup, bread, warm, ordinary. "You plan to leave?" he said. "Yes." "As soon as the road allows?" "Yes." He nodded once. "You're worried." "I don't have the luxury not to be." "For your aunt?" Lenora looked up. "You remember." "I listen." That unsettled her more than comfort would have. "I should have pressed harder earlier," she said. "Every delay matters." "I know," he said, "but tonight isn't negotiable." "I don't like waiting." "Neither do I." She took a spoonful of soup. "You didn't sit," she noted. "I didn't want you to feel watched." Her hand paused. "That was thoughtful." He shifted slightly, as if unused to being thanked. "You looked uncomfortable," he said. "I didn't want that to continue." She lowered the spoon. "Your family is intense." A corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. That's the polite word. She almost smiled herself. Almost. When she finished, he reached for the tray. "I'll make sure no one disturbs you," he said. "Thank you." He turned to leave. "You seemed tired earlier," she said. He paused, but didn't turn. "Today carried weight," he said. "That's all." "I understand," she replied. He nodded once and left. Lenora remained seated. The storm continued. Her aunt still waited, but the house no longer felt indifferent. Lenora lay still, eyes closed. Sleep refused her. Her head throbbed, dull, persistent, as if the day had settled behind her eyes and refused to move on. She turned once, then again, but the ache followed. She sat up slowly. Water, she thought. Just water. She slipped from the bed and wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, moving quietly into the corridor. The house was hushed now, its earlier tensions tucked away, but not gone. She had just reached the bend of the stairs when a voice drifted up from below. "You're not a ghost, are you?" She stopped. "No," she said cautiously. "I don't believe so." A man stepped into the lamplight. Not the Duke. This one was younger, or rather, less contained. His coat was loosened, his hair slightly rumpled, but his eyes were clear. Too clear for someone who had laughed so harshly earlier. "I was hoping for a ghost," he said mildly. "They don't judge." She almost smiled, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I only needed water." "That direction," he said at once, gesturing down the hall. "The kitchen's awake even when the house pretends not to be." She hesitated, then followed. "I'm Thomas," he added. "Before you ask, or before you decide not to." She glanced at him. "Thomas, the inconvenient one," he supplied easily. "The middle son, the one everyone prefers not to explain." Understanding settled. "I'm Lenora," she said, "and I didn't ask. That's why I like you already." She gave a quiet laugh before she could stop herself, and then pressed her fingers to her temple. "Headache?" he asked. "Yes. Family gatherings will do that," he said. "Particularly when you're not meant to be there." She stopped near the kitchen door. "You were different earlier." "Sober?" he guessed. "Yes, I am now." "You seemed unkind," he finished. "I can be. I wasn't aiming for it tonight." She studied him. There was something carefully controlled about him now, as if he were choosing each word. "They don't expect much from me," he said lightly, "which gives me freedom, and resentment. Depends on the hour." She poured herself water, took a sip, then another. "Thank you," she said. "For the water or the honesty?" "Both." A pause, then footsteps. Measured. Familiar. Lenora turned. The Duke stood at the end of the corridor, coat over his arm, concern written plainly across his face before he had time to arrange it. "There you are," he said. Thomas smiled slowly. "Well," he said, stepping back, "I suppose the king has found you after all." The Duke's expression cooled. "Go to bed, Thomas." Thomas inclined his head. To Lenora, not his brother. "Careful," he said softly. "This house eats the quiet ones." Then he was gone. The Duke waited until the sound of footsteps faded. "I knocked," he said. "Earlier. When you didn't answer, I thought, that knocking at this hour might be improper." She offered gently. He exhaled. "Yes." "And that worried you anyway?" "Yes." She took another sip of water. "I had a headache," she said. "I couldn't sleep." He nodded. "I know the feeling." They stood there, the space between them unhurried. "You don't have to escort me back," she said. "I know." Still, he didn't move away. After a moment, she spoke again. "If you need to talk," she said carefully, "I'm awake. Not pity, not obligation. An offering." He looked at her, really looked. "Walk with me," he said. She set the glass down and followed. The study felt smaller at night, not because of the walls, but because the rest of the house had gone quiet, leaving the weight of the day with nowhere else to go. Langbourne closed the door behind them. "You may sit," he said. She didn't. He noticed, then looked away. "I don't often bring people here," he added, as if the explanation mattered. "I won't touch anything," she said. "That's not what I meant." He crossed to the desk and shifted a stack of papers he clearly hadn't needed to move. Silence. Then, without looking at her, "Everyone expects something from me," he said, "even when they pretend not to." She stayed quiet. "My father expected steadiness," he continued. "My aunt expects reward. My brothers expect judgment. My sister expects indifference." "And what do you expect from yourself?" she asked. He paused. "That I do not fail," he said. "Ever." She felt that land. "That's a heavy rule," she said. "It was set long before I understood I could question it." He turned toward the fire. "At dinner," he went on, "they all spoke as if the estate were the burden. And it isn't." "No," he said. "The people are. The honesty surprised him. She could tell. "I shouldn't be saying this," he added. "You invited me here." "Yes," he exhaled. "And that may have been unwise." She stepped closer, not into his space, but enough to be present. "You needed someone who wasn't watching you for advantage," she said. "I don't have one." That was true. It softened something. He turned then, and for the first time since she'd met him, his guard slipped. Just slightly. Their closeness registered all at once. Too close. He didn't move away. Neither did she. The moment hovered. Breath, heat, awareness. A near miss. His gaze dropped to her mouth. Then, immediately, he stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said at once. "That was inappropriate." She blinked, surprised. Not by the moment, but by the apology. "You didn't do anything," she said. "I nearly did," he replied. "And I shouldn't have." A pause. Not awkward. Careful. "I don't mistake this," he added, "for anything more than circumstance." She nodded. "So don't." Relief flickered across his face. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not assuming." "For what?" "That because I spoke, I meant something I don't yet." She smiled faintly. "We're both allowed to notice without deciding." He let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it all day. "Yes," he said. "That." She glanced toward the door. "I should go," she said, "before we both make it stranger." "Probably wise," he agreed. He opened the door for her. As she passed, their shoulders brushed. Accidental, brief, undeniable. He stilled. She did not look back. Neither of them spoke. And when the door closed behind her, Langbourne remained where he was, staring at the place she had been standing, not because he had fallen for her, but because for the first time in a very long while he had spoken without armor, and someone had listened. Morning came without mercy. Light pressed through the curtains, pale and cold, as if the storm had agreed to pause only long enough to watch what everyone would do next. Lenora was already awake. Her head no longer ached, but something else had replaced it. A tight awareness she could not quite name. She dressed carefully, choosing composure over softness, then sat still for a moment before standing. Nothing happened, she told herself. And yet, when she reached the breakfast room, conversation faltered. Not stopped, just adjusted. Langbourne stood near the window, a cup of tea untouched in his hand. He turned when she entered. Their eyes met, only briefly. He inclined his head. Polite. Controlled. Entirely proper. Relief and disappointment arrived together. She crossed the room and took her seat. "You slept well?" his sister asked pleasantly. "Well enough," Lenora replied. Langbourne did not speak. The middle brother arrived late, coat thrown over his shoulder, expression sharper than the night before. "Morning," he said. His gaze flicked between Lenora and Langbourne, lingered a fraction too long. "Well," he added lightly, "I see the house survived the night." "So far," Langbourne replied. The exchange was neutral. Too neutral. Lenora noticed his hand tighten slightly around the teacup. "You're still intending to leave today?" his sister asked Lenora. "Yes," Lenora said at once, "if the road allows." Langbourne's gaze shifted to the window. "It won't," he said. Not sharply, not gently, just fact. A pause followed. The aunt sniffed. "Then our guest is quite stuck." Lenora met her gaze calmly. "Only temporarily." The middle brother smiled. Temporary stays are often the most interesting. Langbourne set his cup down. "Enough," he said quietly. The word landed. Conversation moved on, but something had changed. Lenora felt it. The way the room recalibrated around him, the way no one quite looked at her the same way they had yesterday. Not suspicion, awareness. After breakfast, she stood near the doorway, unsure whether to retreat or linger. Langbourne approached. "Walk with me," he said again. But this time it sounded different. Daylight words. safer. They moved into the corridor, steps measured, distance maintained. "I wanted to be clear," he said, not looking at her, "about last night." "So did I," she replied. "It shouldn't have happened." "It didn't," she said evenly. That made him stop. He turned to her then, fully. "Thank you," he said, "for understanding the difference." She nodded. "I'm not here to complicate your life." "No," he said, "you aren't." That wasn't relief. That was something closer to regret. A servant appeared at the far end of the hall, hesitated, then retreated. Lenora glanced toward the window again. "I still need to go," she said. "My aunt." "I know," he said, "and I won't ask you to stay. But while you are here," he added, "I'd prefer you not feel watched." She studied him. "That may be difficult in this house." "I can manage that part," he replied. She believed him, and that, she realized, was new. They reached the stairs. "This is where I leave you," he said. "For now." "For now," she echoed. He hesitated, just a fraction. "If you need anything," he said, "ask." She smiled faintly. "I will." They parted without touching. But as Lenora climbed the stairs, she knew one thing with certainty. Nothing had happened. And yet everything had. The next morning, Lenora woke to a quieter house. Not peaceful, just muted. The storm had eased, but the cold remained. Pale light pressed through the curtains, dull and thin, as though the day itself had little confidence in what it would bring. She dressed and waited for the familiar sounds of the house to settle around her. They did not. When she stepped into the corridor, she noticed it at once. The Duke was absent. No measured footsteps, no low voice issuing quiet instructions, no sense of his presence anchoring the space. At breakfast, the absence became unmistakable. His chair sat empty. Conversation continued around it. Weather, delays, servants unable to reach the village. But it bent strangely, as though avoiding the space he should have occupied. Lenora kept her expression composed. She was halfway through her tea when a maid approached her place at the table, careful not to draw attention. "Miss Penhaligon," she said softly, "His Grace instructed me to see that you are comfortable today, and that you lack for nothing." Lenora looked up. "Did he say when he would return?" The maid hesitated. Only a second, but it was enough. "No, miss." That was all. The meal ended without incident. Polite, uneventful. Yet Lenora felt watched in a new way, not with scrutiny, but awareness. As she rose to leave, a small voice followed her. "You're going upstairs?" Lenora turned. The little girl stood near the doorway, hands clasped behind her back, studying her as though she had reached a decision. "I am," Lenora said gently. "Is that permitted?" The girl shrugged. "I permit it." Lenora smiled despite herself. The child followed her without asking, her footsteps light and unashamed. Inside Lenora's room, she looked around with open curiosity. "You tell stories," the girl announced. Lenora blinked. "I beg your pardon." "Last night," the girl said. "In the corridor. You were talking." Lenora smiled faintly. "I wasn't speaking to anyone. I think I was thinking out loud." The girl considered this. "That's still a story." Lenora laughed softly. "My mama says Uncle doesn't like stories," the girl continued, climbing onto the chair near the window. "He says they distract people." "And what do you think?" "I think he's wrong," the girl said promptly. "My mama also says he doesn't want a wife," she added casually. Lenora stilled. "Oh?" "Yes. She says he thinks women are troublesome, or complicated, or something like that." "And do you agree?" The girl frowned thoughtfully. "No, I think he's lonely." The words landed quietly and stayed. That afternoon passed more gently than Lenora expected. The child returned again and again, coaxing stories from her. Lenora invented them as she went, tales of winter journeys, clever women, houses that learned to breathe again after long silences. The girl listened with complete seriousness, Tell another, she demanded. One more, Lenora agreed. Then you must promise to behave. I always behave, the girl said solemnly. Lenora doubted that very much. Still, the house felt different by evening. Not calmer, but warmer. And yet as dusk settled and lamps were lit, one thing remained unchanged. The Duke did not return. It was the night before Christmas Eve. Lenora did not intend to wander. She only needed water. Her head still ached faintly, the kind of ache that came from too many thoughts pressing against one another. The corridor was dim. The lamps turned low. Then she heard laughter. Soft, uneven. She slowed. Careful, a woman's voice said lightly. You'll wake the entire house if you keep thumping about like that. A man laughed. Too loudly this time. I assure you, the solicitor replied, words slurring just enough to matter. I'm perfectly capable of remaining seated. Lenora stopped. The door ahead was not fully closed. She should have turned back. Instead, she heard the sister say, almost fondly, You always were stubborn about your duties. Even tonight. A man must honor his responsibilities, he said with misplaced pride. Even in a snowstorm. Of course, the sister murmured. You've always been dependable. There was a pause. Then she added casually, You did bring the papers with you, didn't you? Lenora's breath stilled. Always, he said. Never leave such things unattended. They're quite safe. I should hope so, she replied, smiling. Lenora could hear it in her voice. My father trusted you above all others. Another pause. A chair scraped softly. You look flushed, the sister said. Perhaps you should sit back. You've had more wine than you realize. Nonsense, he laughed. He stopped. Lenora leaned closer. Not into the room, just enough to hear. There, the sister said gently. Let me. There was the faint sound of leather shifting. Paper. The solicitor spoke again, distracted. You always did have a calming presence. Your mother used to say, Yes, she said quickly. I remember. Lenora's heart began to pound. Where was I? The man asked. You were telling me, the sister replied smoothly, that everything was in order. It is, he said, satisfied. Every name, every seal, precisely as your father intended. That's such a comfort, she said. Lenora heard the unmistakable sound of parchment being folded. Then another. The sister spoke again, closer now. You must rest. The storm has made heroes of punctual men foolish. He chuckled. You worry too much. Someone must. A soft thud, the satchel being set down. Lenora stepped back. She did not wait to hear more. She returned to her room with careful steps, closing the door behind her as quietly as she could manage. Her hands were shaking. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. They had not said it outright, but she understood. The will had been touched. Something had been taken. Something had been replaced, and the man entrusted with everything did not even know he'd lost it. Outside, the wind pressed against the house again. Tomorrow was Christmas, and no one else yet knew that the future of this family had just been altered in the dark. The knock came sharp and sudden. Lenora looked up from the half-packed trunk, pulse jumping. Yes? The door opened without ceremony. His sister stood there, eyes bright, mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. His Grace requests your presence in the study. Lenora closed the trunk slowly. Now? Immediately. The walk there felt longer than it should have. The house was awake in that brittle Christmas morning way. Too quiet, too alert. She passed servants who paused, then looked away. Past a closed door she knew to be his aunt's. The study door was shut. She knocked once. Come in. He was standing behind the desk. No papers in his hands, no coat, just him. Still, deliberate. You wish to see me? Yes. He didn't offer her a chair. Neither did she sit. I won't keep you long, he said. Time matters today. It does. A beat. I have been told, he continued, that you intend to leave the moment the road clears. That has always been my intention, even knowing it may not clear in time. She met his gaze. I don't have the luxury of waiting. Silence stretched. Nor, he said. Do I? Her breath caught. She said nothing. I will speak plainly, he went on, because this is not a day for caution. She folded her hands. Steady. You were prepared, he said, to marry a man you do not know. Her chin lifted. That is my affair. Yes, he agreed, and it is precisely why I cannot remain silent. He came around the desk then. Not fast, not hesitant, each step chosen. You would give your life away, he said, for the sake of someone who once gave you hers. Her eyes burned. That does not make you foolish, he continued. It makes you dangerous. She let out a short, incredulous laugh. Dangerous? To yourself. He stopped a few paces away. I have watched you, he said. Not because I wished to, because I could not help it. Her heart thudded. You move through this house as though it does not belong to you, he said. Yet everything you do alters it. She shook her head. You are mistaken. I am not. Another step. I do not know what name society would give what I feel, he said. And I do not care. Her breath came shallow now. I know only this, he said. I will not stand by while you are bartered. She whispered, My lord, do not marry him. The words fell clean. Final. She stared at him. You ask the impossible. No, he said. I offer an alternative. Her pulse roared in her ears. I will settle the debt, he said. In your aunt's name. Today. Tears spilled despite her effort. You would regret it, perhaps. She laughed once, broken. You don't even know me. I know enough. Silence pressed in. You would bind yourself to a stranger, she said. On Christmas Day? Yes. Her knees weakened. He caught her arm instantly. Steady, respectful. I'm not asking for gratitude, he said quietly. Nor haste. I'm asking you not to destroy yourself out of duty. She pulled back, wiping her cheeks. This is madness. Yes, and if I refuse, then I will still see you safely on your way. That stopped her. She searched his face. You would do that? I would. A long pause. I cannot answer you, she said at last. I did not expect you to, he replied. Another pause. But understand this, he added. I will not pretend I did not speak today. She nodded. When she turned to leave, her hand brushed his sleeve. Neither moved, neither spoke. And when she stepped into the corridor, one truth echoed louder than the bells outside. Christmas had come, and nothing would be the same again. Lenora didn't realize she'd walked until the cold slapped sense into her lungs. She stood just beyond the threshold, snowlight reflecting off the drive, the world pale and unforgiving. And for a moment, the quiet felt louder than the bells. Her aunt's face rose in her mind without permission. Aunt Susanna, a woman who had lived well for years, not spoiled, not idle, but steady, respected, safe in her own house. Now Lenora pictured her in the opposite state, shawl pulled tight, pride swallowing panic, standing where no Penhaligon should ever stand. Out, cold, watched, turned into a cautionary tale, and it would be because Lenora had delayed, because she'd insisted there must be another way, while time kept moving anyway. She pressed her gloved hand to her stomach like she could hold herself together by force. Langbourne was a stranger, a sweet man from what she'd seen, a careful one, the sort of man who didn't use his power like a club. But she didn't know him, not truly. And still, he had offered something no one else had offered her, a way to save her aunt without selling Lenora's life to Harrogate. Lenora inhaled once. Then, in the middle of all that white silence, she spoke under her breath. Sharp, commanding, meant for herself alone. Lenora, she told herself, you will march right back into that study and tell Mr. Langbourne you accept. A beat. And if he still wants it, she added, chin lifting as if pride could carry her through fear. "You will marry him." Her pulse kicked like it didn't agree with her mouth. She turned before she could lose her nerve, and she walked back inside. The door opened with a soft click. Langborn looked up immediately, as if he'd been listening for her steps, trying not to. He rose. Not triumphant, not smug, just present. "Miss Penhaligon," he said quietly. Lenora didn't hover in the doorway. She crossed the room like she was delivering a verdict. "I've thought of it," she said. His eyes sharpened. "And," Lenora lifted her head, "I accept your proposal." A beat, so small it barely existed, but something shifted in his face. Relief came first, then disbelief, then a warmth that looked almost painful. Lenora's throat tightened, so she added quick and sassy to cover the tremor she refused to show. "And even marry you," she said, "if you still want to be so mad as to ask it." His mouth curved. A real smile, brief, genuine, the kind that didn't perform. It startled her more than any grand declaration could have. Then his eyes shone. He blinked once, hard, like he hadn't meant to feel anything at all. "You say it so boldly," he murmured, voice rougher than before, "as if you aren't handing me something sacred." Lenora's breath caught. He stepped closer, but stopped at a respectful distance, leaving her room to breathe. "I need you to hear this clearly," he said. "I'm not trapping you." "I know," Lenora said too fast. Langborn's gaze held hers. "No," he replied softly. "You don't. Not yet." Her heart stuttered. He didn't touch her. He didn't lean in. But his voice did what touch would have done. "You are choosing the lesser danger," he said, "because you love her, and because you were raised to believe love must always cost you." Tears rose hot and humiliating. Lenora turned her face slightly as if she could hide them from a man who clearly saw everything anyway. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered, half accusation. His voice turned steadier. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said. "I'm preventing a man like Harrogate from owning your aunt's life and calling it mercy." Lenora swallowed. Langborn exhaled once, like he'd been holding something in. "Tell me the figure," he said. Lenora blinked. "What?" "The debt," he said. "The exact amount the bank is owed." It tasted like iron when she spoke it. £38,000, she said, with interest. Langborn didn't flinch. He only nodded once. "Good," he said simply. Lenora stared at him. "Good." "Yes," he said, "because now we deal in fact, not fear." He moved to the desk, already reaching for paper. "Today, the bank is closed," he said, "so we don't pretend we can pay what cannot be received." Lenora's chest tightened. "Then what do we do?" "We remove the trap," he said. "I sign an undertaking, binding, witnessed, properly drafted. Your aunt will hold it in her hands before Harrogate puts anything in front of her." Lenora's pulse roared. "And he can't." "He can still arrive," Langborn said. "He can still threaten, but he won't have leverage." He looked up then, and his voice softened in a way that hit too deep. "And you," he added, "won't have to marry a stranger just to keep a woman you love from the street." Lenora stood very still, because that sentence, plain and practical, felt like a mercy she didn't deserve. "Put on your cloak," he said gently. "We leave now." And that was how Christmas turned into motion. Not celebration, not peace. A decision, a carriage, 3 hours, and a future Lenora had not planned, sitting across from her, wearing his calm like armor. Lenora's fingers paused at her cloak. For one ridiculous heartbeat, she stood there like a statue, because accepting help was one thing. Accepting him, even as a temporary answer, was another. Langborn didn't rush her. He only waited, expression steady, as if he understood that bravery sometimes looked like a woman trying to breathe without shaking. Lenora pulled her cloak around her shoulders. "I don't want you to regret this," she said, voice low. Langborn's gaze held hers. "Then don't give me a reason to," he replied. It was not a warning. It was a promise. He reached past her, not touching her, and opened the study door as if the house itself should not be allowed to swallow her up again. "Come," he said simply. And Lenora went. The butler appeared, composed in the way servants were trained to be even on Christmas Day. "Your Grace." Langbourne's tone didn't rise. It didn't sharpen. It simply became final. "The carriage. Now." "Yes, Your Grace." Lenora kept her voice polite. Firm, but not sharp. "Please," she added, "if the road allows it, we cannot afford delays." The butler bowed and moved at once. Her companion stood behind her, silent, hands folded. The footman waited near the door, hat in hand, face tight with worry. Langbourne glanced toward him. "You'll ride with us," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." Lenora looked at Langbourne as they stepped outside. "You're taking my footman too?" "I'm taking your time seriously," he replied. And it was such a simple sentence, so practical, that it almost made her throat ache again. The wheels turned before the bells finished their second round. Outside, the snow had eased into something quieter, not kind, just less violent. The road, however, had no intention of becoming gentle. The carriage rocked over ruts, slowed around corners, and lurched enough to make Lenora brace her hand on the seat. Langbourne sat opposite her, coat buttoned, gloves on, calm like a man who'd been born into control. Lenora hated that calm, and wanted it. "You said your aunt's estate is called Penhaligon House," he said. "Yes." "And the bank. Do you recall its name?" Lenora exhaled once, forcing herself into clarity. "Harrogate has been circling for months," she said, "but the debt is held by Eastwick and Sons." Langbourne nodded, filing it away. "And the amount," he said, "is 38,000. "With interest," Lenora corrected. "With interest," he agreed. His composure didn't shift, and it irritated her all over again. "You truly mean to do this?" she said. Langbourne's gaze lifted. "Yes." Lenora's fingers tightened around the edge of her seat. "Why?" she demanded, then immediately wished she hadn't. The question sounded too exposed, too young. Langbourne didn't flinch. "You asked me once why I cared that you looked flustered," he said. "Do you remember?" Lenora did. She remembered the posting house, the crowd, the heat of panic in her throat. His voice steady across the noise. "You look worried." She said nothing. Langbourne continued, quiet as the carriage rattled. "Because you were trying to hold yourself together," he said, and I recognized it. Lenora's pulse jumped at the jolt of the carriage, but this time it wasn't the road. She looked away quickly, as if staring out the window could fix what had just happened inside her chest. A pause. Then she forced herself back into sense. "If you do this," she said, "I will repay you." Langbourne's mouth twitched, almost amusement. "You're not in a position to repay £38,000. "I didn't ask for your opinion," Lenora said. That earned her a real look, one that held her, measured her. "Fine," he said. "Then repay me in honesty." Lenora blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, "if you're afraid of me, say so." The carriage hit another rut. Lenora's hand slid, and she caught herself, only to find her glove brushing his sleeve as he leaned forward at the same time to steady the lantern. A small touch, an accident, but it landed like a question. Lenora pulled back instantly, heart pounding like she'd been caught doing something indecent. Langbourne didn't react. He didn't smile. He didn't push. He simply sat back again, giving her room. And somehow that restraint was worse than boldness. Lenora swallowed, voice quieter. "I'm not afraid of you," she lied. Langbourne's eyes didn't soften. "No," he said. "You're afraid of what you might do if you believe me." Lenora stared at him. A beat. Then she looked away again because he was too close to the truth. She heard her own thoughts like a whisper she couldn't shut up. "He's sweet. He's careful. He isn't forcing me. So why does it feel like standing at the edge of a cliff?" 3 hours, Langbourne said, returning to the practical. If the road holds. Lenora nodded once. If my aunt signs before we arrive, she began. She won't, he said. You can't promise that. I can promise, he replied evenly, that she won't sign without hearing a better offer first. Lenora's throat tightened. A better offer, not romance, not rescue, a document, a fact, a way out. The carriage rounded a bend, and Lenora's stomach dropped. Another carriage was ahead on the road, moving fast, too fast for leisure. Langbourne's gaze sharpened at once. That's not ours, Lenora said. No, Langbourne agreed. A pause. It's heading the same direction, he added. Lenora's hands went cold inside her gloves. Harrowgate, she whispered. Langbourne leaned toward the window, eyes narrowed. If it is, he said quietly, then we don't arrive to plead. Lenora's voice steadied, hard, focused. We arrive to cut him off. Langbourne looked at her like she'd just reminded him why he admired her. Tell me what you need, he said. Lenora didn't hesitate. A witness, she said. Someone my aunt trusts, and paper she can hold. Langbourne nodded once. Then we give her both. Penhaligon House rose out of the white like a memory. Warm stone. Tall windows glowing softly. The kind of home that made you believe in permanence. Until a bank reminded you permanence was a lie. The carriage crunched into the drive. Before the wheels fully stopped, the front door swung open. Aunt Susanna stood there. Not frail, not weak. But Lenora saw the fear anyway, in the way her aunt's hands clenched, in the way she stepped forward too quickly, as if she'd been waiting for bad news. Lenora climbed down, and her aunt moved like a woman starving for proof her world wasn't ending. Lenora. Aunt. They collided into an embrace so tight it stole Lenora's breath. You're here, her aunt whispered, voice breaking. Oh, thank God you're here. Lenora's eyes burned. I came as fast as I could. Her aunt pulled back, cupping Lenora's face like she was still 17 and grieving. You look thin, she said fiercely. You look like you haven't eaten properly in a week. Lenora tried to smile. I ate, she lied. Her aunt sniffed, unconvinced, and then her gaze slid past Lenora, landing on the tall man stepping down from the carriage with quiet authority. Langbourne removed his hat. He didn't swagger, he didn't perform. He simply became present, and the air adjusted around him. Aunt Susanna blinked. Lenora felt her stomach flip, because now she had to say it. This is... Lenora began. Langbourne beat her to it, gentle and precise. Edmund Langbourne, he said, bowing his head. Duke of Portland. Her aunt's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed with sharp intelligence. A duke, she repeated. Lenora heard the unspoken question. And why is a duke on my doorstep on Christmas Day? Lenora lifted her chin, refusing to look guilty. We were stranded in the storm, she said. He offered shelter. Aunt Susanna's gaze flicked to Lenora's face, reading what Lenora wasn't saying yet. Then, unexpectedly, her aunt's mouth softened. Well, she said briskly, like warmth could fix panic if she moved fast enough. You'll both come in before you freeze. Then she looked at Langbourne with a bluntness only family could manage. Do you prefer cookies and warm milk? She asked, or crumpets and milk? Lenora's breath caught. Because that was her aunt. Even at the edge of ruin, she still offered comfort first. Langbourne looked startled. Then something in his expression warmed. I'll take whatever you offer, he said. Her aunt nodded once, satisfied. Good answer, she said. Come inside. Lenora stepped in beside him. The hall smelled like pine and hearth and the faint sweetness of something baking. And for the first time in days, Lenora felt the house wrap around her like safety. Then her aunt's voice lowered as she drew Lenora a step aside. He called, Aunt Susanna whispered, eyes sharp again. Mr. Harrowgate, 2 days ago, said he'd come today to settle things properly. Lenora's blood chilled. Langbourne, still close enough to hear, didn't interrupt. He only looked at Lenora. A silent question. Are you ready? Lenora swallowed. Yes, she said, steady now. Because she hadn't come to cry. She had come to stop a signature, and she wasn't alone anymore. The evening went well. That was the strange part. Lenora had expected the house to feel like a courtroom the moment she stepped inside. Instead, her aunt fed them like it was the most natural thing in the world to have a duke at her table on Christmas Day. Harrowgate never came. Her aunt said it with a satisfied little bite, as if she'd been waiting all week for the pleasure. Either the man has sense, Aunt Susanna murmured, or the snow has finally done something useful. Lenora tried to laugh. She managed half of one. Across the room, Langbourne sat too straight, polite to the point of pain. He ate what was placed before him, praised what he could, and refused to look like anything could shake him. And then her aunt poured milk. Goat milk. Lenora saw the exact moment it went wrong, because Langbourne's hand paused over his cup as if his body recognized danger before his mind did. He drank anyway, because her aunt was watching him like a general. 10 minutes later, the color drained from his face so quietly, Lenora wondered if she imagined it. He rose when her aunt rose. Perfect manners. Perfect control. But as the servants cleared, Langbourne's gaze flicked to her aunt's cup, and then to the pot. He leaned toward Aunt Susanna, voice low enough to be polite, but not quite steady. May I ask what milk that was? Her aunt blinked. Goat. Langbourne held very still. Lenora watched his jaw tighten, like he was furious at his own weakness. Aunt Susanna's eyes narrowed. You're allergic, she said flatly. Langbourne didn't deny it. He only said, It appears I'm about to be. Lenora covered her mouth with her napkin, hiding her expression. Aunt Susanna turned on him immediately. Why didn't you say so? It was offered, he replied, and the faintest edge of humor appeared for the first time. I believed refusal might be considered a capital offense. Her aunt stared. Then she huffed. Tea, she snapped at a servant. Strong, peppermint, and bring a second pot. Chamomile as well. I won't have a man fainting in my house on Christmas. Langbourne began. Mrs. Penhaligon. Susanna, she corrected. Langbourne hesitated, then gave in. Susanna. Lenora's heart did a foolish little leap at how his mouth shaped it. Her aunt pointed toward the corridor like she was dismissing a footman. Go sit, breathe, and don't you dare try to be proud in my doorway. Langbourne's gaze flicked to Lenora, quick, apologetic, almost embarrassed. You're quite green, Lenora said before she could stop herself. Her aunt's mouth twitched. She has eyes. Go. Langbourne obeyed. Not because he was weak, because Aunt Susanna had a way of making obedience feel like the only dignified option. When the tea came, her aunt shoved the cup at him. Drink. Langbourne took it with both hands like a man accepting defeat. Her aunt clapped her hands once, brisk again, as if emotion was something she tolerated only in emergencies. That's settled. Now I'm going to bed. My house will be quiet, and if anyone starts confessing love in the corridors, I'll throw a slipper at them. Lenora choked on a laugh. Langbourne's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Aunt Susanna paused at the door and glanced back at Lenora. And you, she said, softer now, come to my room in a moment. Later, when Lenora entered her aunt's room, she found her in her nightcap, brushing her hair with furious purpose. Her aunt didn't waste time. You like him, Aunt Susanna said. Lenora blinked. That's not. Yes, it is, her aunt cut in. And before you start being noble and stiff like your mother, listen. Lenora's stomach tightened. Her aunt pointed the hairbrush at her like a weapon. We live too much by tradition, she said. We wait. We swallow words. We let time do what it always does. Steal chances. Lenora's voice came out small. Aunt. Lenora, her aunt said, and the sound of her name in her aunt's voice was a hand on her cheek. A man does not spend that kind of fortune because he is bored. Lenora looked down. He's kind. He's taken, her aunt corrected sharply. Taken with you. Lenora swallowed. I don't even know him. You know enough, her aunt said, then softened. And you know yourself. You're shy and you're stubborn, and you will stand in a doorway for the rest of your life waiting for permission to be happy. Lenora's eyes burned. Her aunt stepped closer, lowering her voice. Go check on him, she said. Not as a duty, not as gratitude. As you. Be warm, be bold. And if you wait too long, someone else will walk in and speak their mind to him, and you'll spend the rest of your days regretting you were polite. Lenora's pulse thudded. But what do I even— Bring tea, her aunt said briskly. Use your hands, use your eyes, and if your mouth fails, let your kindness speak first. Lenora hesitated. Her aunt's gaze softened, suddenly gentle. My baby, she murmured. You don't have to wait on a man to make the first move. You only have to be brave enough to be seen. Lenora inhaled, then nodded once. Langbourne's room was not far. That was the problem. Every step toward it felt like crossing a line she'd been trained not to see. She knocked softly. A pause. Then his voice, lower than earlier. Come in. Lenora entered with the tea tray in both hands. Langbourne stood near the window, coat removed, white shirt slightly open at the throat, like he'd stopped caring about appearances the moment the door closed. He looked over his shoulder. His eyes landed on the tray, then on her, and something in his face shifted. Relief, so quick it might have been imagined. You shouldn't be up, he said. Lenora lifted her chin. Neither should you. A faint sound, almost a laugh. He stepped forward, then paused like he'd remembered he was a duke and she was not his. Your aunt? He asked. She's asleep, Lenora said, after threatening to assault anyone who confesses love in a corridor. Langbourne's mouth twitched. A sensible woman. Lenora set the tray down carefully. I brought more, she said. Peppermint first, then chamomile, because she said the house will not host fainting. Langbourne's eyes warmed, just slightly. She's formidable. She's terrifying, Lenora corrected. He took the cup. His fingers trembled once. So small, so controlled, it would have been easy to miss. Lenora didn't miss it. She stepped closer without thinking. Sit, she said. Langbourne lifted a brow. Is that an order? Lenora met his gaze, trying for calm and getting honesty instead. It is a request, she said, from a woman who doesn't want you collapsing and making my aunt feel vindicated. His expression softened. He sat. Lenora watched him drink, slowly, like he could not afford to look weak in front of her. When he set the cup down, his breath eased. A fraction. That helps, he admitted. Lenora's chest tightened at the word admitted. You should have told her, Lenora said quietly. About the milk. Langbourne's jaw flexed. I didn't want to be difficult. You weren't being difficult, Lenora said. You were being human. His gaze lifted to hers. Held, too long for comfort. Not long enough to be reckless. I'm not accustomed, he said, voice lower now, to anyone caring whether I am human. Lenora's throat tightened. She reached for the cup. Simple, practical movement, and brushed his hand by accident. His fingers stilled under hers, not grasping, not claiming, just present. Lenora pulled back too quickly. I'm sorry, she murmured. For what? He asked. Lenora's voice faltered. For touching you like it meant something. Silence. Then Langbourne spoke, very carefully. It did. Lenora's breath caught. His hands shifted. Slow, deliberate, until his fingers rested over hers on the table. Not trapping, not forcing, just holding. Warm, steady. Lenora's pulse thudded in her ears. You're kind, she whispered, as if saying it softly would make it less dangerous. His thumb moved once, a small stroke over her knuckle. Don't, he said quietly. Lenora blinked. Don't what? Don't call it kindness, he replied. Kindness is what one offers a stranger. Her breath shook. And what is this? She asked. His gaze flicked to her mouth. One helpless second. then snapped back up like restraint was a discipline he'd learned the hard way. "This," he said, voice rougher, "is what I've been trying not to name." Lenora's heart stumbled. She didn't move. Neither did he. A near kiss lived in the air between them, close enough to feel, far enough to survive. Then he released her hand like he'd been burned by his own wanting. "I apologize," he said immediately. Lenora swallowed. "For what?" "For forgetting myself," he said, standing too fast, turning away as if distance could save them both. Lenora stared at his back, at the breadth of his shoulders, the tension in his posture, the way he looked like a man fighting his own heart. And because panic would have been easier than tenderness, she reached for the only weapon she had left. "Wit." Her voice came out soft, almost stunned. "You are so tall." He froze. Then slowly he turned his head, just enough to look at her. Lenora's cheeks heated. "It's inconvenient," she added, trying to sound annoyed and failing. "I can't even look at you without feeling like I'm—" She stopped, breath catching on the truth. "Feeling like I'm falling." Langborn's expression softened in a way that made her chest hurt. "Inconvenient," he repeated low. Lenora lifted her chin. "Yes." A beat. Then he stepped closer, careful, restrained, until he was within reach again, but not touching. "Finish your tea," Lenora said, voice trembling with forced steadiness. "And tomorrow you will tell my aunt you're allergic. Properly." His mouth twitched. "Yes, ma'am." Lenora let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. Then she turned and walked to the door before she did something reckless. Behind her, his voice stopped her. Quiet, honest. "Lenora." She paused without turning. "Thank you," he said. Lenora's hand tightened on the handle. She managed, "Sleep," and left before he could hear how much that simple word cost her. "Lenora." His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Something in it pulled her back before pride could. She turned. He was closer than he'd been a moment ago. Still pale, still fighting his own body, but standing like the effort was worth it. "I meant it," he said. "Thank you." Lenora tried to keep her face composed, tried to keep the trembling out of her breath. "You should lie down," she said. "You're sick." His mouth twitched faintly. "I am inconveniently alive." Langborn --. He lifted a hand, slow and careful, giving her time to step away if she wanted. She didn't. His fingers hovered near her cheek, not touching yet. A question in the pause. Lenora swallowed. Then she nodded. Barely. His fingertips brushed her face with such gentleness it made her eyes sting on the spot. Like he was trying to memorize the shape of her without taking anything he hadn't been given. Lenora's voice broke, annoyed at herself. "You're the one supposed to be in bed," she whispered. "Why does it have to be you comforting me?" His hand stilled against her cheek. "Because you've been carrying too much," he said quietly. "And because—" He stopped himself, jaw tight. Lenora's breath shook. "Because what?" His eyes held hers. "Honest, unhidden. Because I can't watch you fall apart alone," he said. That did it. Tears slipped out before she could stop them. Silent, humiliating, hot. Lenora laughed once. Broken. "This is absurd." "Yes," he murmured. "Come here." Not an order. An invitation. He opened his arms like he'd been taught restraint all his life and was choosing, for once, to be human anyway. Lenora hesitated for half a heartbeat, then stepped into him. Langborn held her carefully, not crushing, not possessive, just firm enough to make her feel held, like she could finally let her shoulders drop. Lenora pressed her forehead to his chest and tried to breathe. His hand moved up her back in a slow, steady stroke. "You're shaking?" he said softly. "I am not." "You are." "Fine," she muttered into his shirt. "I'm slightly falling apart." His breath warmed the top of her head. "I've seen worse," he said. Lenora sniffed, then pulled back just enough to glare up at him through tears. "You're pale." "I'm improving," he said. And stubborn. Unbearably, he agreed. Her lips trembled, half laugh, half sob. He lifted his hand again and traced the tear at the corner of her eye with his thumb, slow and reverent, like it mattered. Lenora caught his wrist gently. "You are sick," she whispered, still trying to argue with reality. "You shouldn't be doing this." His eyes softened. "I should," he said, "because you think you must earn care, and you don't." Lenora's throat tightened. She looked down, blinking hard. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. He gave the smallest shake of his head. "Neither do I," he said, "but I know what I want." Her pulse stumbled. "And what is that?" she whispered. Langbourne's jaw flexed like he was fighting the urge to say too much. Then he chose boldness, anyway. "I want you to stop thinking you are a burden," he said. "I want you to stop preparing to leave every room the moment you're wanted." Lenora's voice came out small. "I had to leave." "I know," he said, "but you still looked like you were punishing yourself for staying." Lenora stared at him. He held her gaze. Then, softer, rougher. "I don't want Harrowgate," he said, as if the name tasted like iron. "I don't want that bargain near you." Lenora swallowed. "You said you would settle the debt either way." "I will," he said. "But I want you with your aunt, safe and smiling again. I want you to walk into that house and not feel like you're being sold." Her eyes filled again. He looked at her like he could handle every tear she had. Lenora let out a shaky breath. "You're going to regret this," she whispered, as if saying it enough times could protect them both. His mouth lifted, just slightly. "Possibly," he said. "But tonight I'm more concerned with you." Lenora huffed a laugh through tears. "That's the problem. You're sick and you're still trying to be noble." He leaned closer, not a kiss, not yet. Just close enough for her to feel his warmth. His voice dropped. "Then let me be selfish for once." Lenora's breath caught. Langbourne's eyes flicked to her mouth, one helpless second, then back up, controlled again. He cleared his throat like a man bracing himself. "So," he said, very carefully casual, as if he hadn't just held her like she mattered more than pride. "When will the wedding be?" Lenora blinked. "Excuse me." His brows lifted, faintly dry. "I assumed you'd prefer spring, unless you're fond of snow and scandal." Lenora stared at him. Then a laugh burst out of her, real, surprised, relieved, and he looked at her like that sound alone was worth the fortune. "You are impossible," she said, wiping her cheeks. "I've been told," he replied. Lenora's smile faltered into something softer. "Langbourne." He stilled, suddenly serious again. "Yes?" Lenora looked at his pale face, his careful hands, the way he'd held her without taking. She swallowed. "I can't promise I won't be afraid," she said. His eyes gentled. "Good," he murmured. "Then we'll be afraid properly." Lenora's breath shook. "And you truly want this?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word hit the room like a vow. Lenora nodded once. "Small. Brave." "Then," she whispered, voice trembling but sure, "we'll speak to my aunt in the morning." Langbourne exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. Then, softer, almost boyish in the relief of it, he murmured near her temple, "Spring, then." Lenora's smile returned. Watery. "Spring," she echoed. He held her just a moment longer, safe, warm, steady. And for the first time all winter, Lenora felt the future stop looking like a threat. Lenora's laugh faded into something quieter. She was still close enough to feel his warmth, still held, still safe, and that was precisely why the next words felt like betrayal. Lenora's fingers tightened in Langbourne's shirt. "Langbourne," she said, and her voice changed. He felt it instantly. His arms loosened just enough to look at her. "What?" he asked. Lenora swallowed. "I have to tell you something," she said. "Now, before I lose my nerve." His expression went still. Alert, listening. Lenora lifted her chin, forcing the words out cleanly. "I saw your sister," she said. With the solicitor. A pause. Not surprise. Not disbelief. Just something dark and contained behind his eyes. In my house, he said. Yes, Lenora answered. I didn't mean to. I had a headache and went for water and... She cut herself off. It doesn't matter why. I saw them. His jaw tightened once. Go on. Lenora's throat burned. She was laughing, Lenora said. Too close to him. Too comfortable. Like she knew she could. Langbourn didn't move. And then, Lenora continued, she opened his bag. His gaze sharpened. She took out a folded document, Lenora said, each word steadying as she spoke it. Sealed. Important enough that it wasn't meant to leave his hand. Langbourn's breath slowed. Lenora's voice dropped. And she replaced it, Lenora said, with another paper, like she'd done it before. Silence pressed in. Lenora searched his face, needing him to believe her. I'm not guessing, she said, quieter now. I watched her do it. Langbourn's eyes held hers. I believe you, he said. Lenora blinked hard. You do? Yes, he said again, like it was the simplest thing in the world. I do. Her lungs finally found air. But... Lenora's voice caught. If it was the will, it wasn't, Langbourn said. Lenora went still. What? Langbourn's mouth twitched, dry, almost grim. It wasn't the will, he repeated. Not the original. Lenora stared at him. How can you possibly... Because I already secured it, he said, calm as stone. Before the solicitor stepped into this house. Lenora's pulse slammed. You took it from him? I took it, he admitted, because I don't trust a man to guard something priceless while drinking brandy in a strange house. Lenora's brows knit. Then what did she take? Langbourn's gaze lowered to her hand, still resting on his chest. Then back to her eyes. A decoy, he said, or something she assumed was the prize. Lenora's stomach twisted. So she stole the wrong thing. Yes, he said. And you're sure? Langbourn's voice went quieter. I'm sure, he said. But I'm not pleased. Lenora's fingers curled. What do we do? She whispered. Langbourn lifted his hand, slow, steady, and brushed his thumb over her knuckles once, grounding her. For tonight, he said, we do nothing that warns her. Lenora frowned. Nothing? We let her think she's clever, he said, and we watch what she does with it. Lenora's breath shook. And if she tries again? Langbourn's eyes hardened. Just a fraction. Then you come to me, he said. Immediately. Lenora's voice was small. I didn't want to be the one to bring trouble into your family. Langbourn's gaze softened again. You didn't bring it, he said. You just saw it. Lenora swallowed, eyes burning. And you're not angry at me for telling you? Langbourn gave a single, quiet shake of his head. No, he said. I'm grateful. Lenora's lips parted. For what? For being brave enough to speak, he said, even when you were shaking in my arms. Her breath caught. His voice dropped, honest again. And for trusting me with it. Lenora nodded once. Then, because she couldn't hold it in any longer, she whispered, I'm scared. Langbourn's hand rose, careful, gentle, and rested at the side of her face again. Good, he murmured. Then stay close. Lenora blinked. Close? His mouth twitched faintly. Until morning, he said, as if that made it proper. And then we speak to your aunt. And then we decide what to do with my sister. Lenora's heart stuttered. All right, she whispered. Langbourn's gaze held hers. Steady. All right, he repeated. And for the first time since she stepped into his life, Lenora believed him completely.